The leather portfolio hit the conference table with a sound that made everyone in the room look up. Inside were 14 years of work. 14 years of deals nobody else could close. 14 years of relationships nobody else could build. 14 years that Graham Sterling, the incoming director, had just declared worthless. "We're eliminating your role," he'd said 3 minutes earlier. Standing there in his expensive suit with his MBA confidence, looking at me like I was a line item on a spreadsheet he could just delete. It's nothing personal, just redundancy from the merger. 47 people in that transition briefing, every one of them watching to see how I'd react. If I'd beg, if I'd argue, if I'd make a scene. I didn't do any of that. I just reached into my bag, pulled out the portfolio I'd been maintaining for years, and slid it across the polished wood table to Catherine Monroe, the CFO of the company that was acquiring us. She opened it, started reading. Her expression changed. She looked up at me with something I couldn't quite identify. Then, she turned her head slowly toward Graham, and she started laughing. Not a polite chuckle, not a restrained corporate laugh. Full, uncontrollable laughter that echoed off the walls and made Graham's face drain of color. What was in that portfolio? Documentation that proved Graham had been systematically taking credit for my work for 8 years. Evidence that showed 63% of our division's revenue came from relationships I'd built personally. Proof that the redundant role he was eliminating was actually the only thing keeping his operation profitable. This is the story of how one portfolio destroyed a career and launched another. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. My name is Victor Hayes. I'm 51 years old. For the past 14 years, I've worked in commercial insurance brokerage. That's the invisible industry that keeps businesses protected from catastrophic loss. I don't sell basic policies. I structure complex risk management programs for clients whose exposures are too complicated for standard insurance markets. I joined Sterling Risk Partners 14 years ago when it was still called Harrison & Associates. Graham Sterling wasn't even with the company yet. He joined 3 years after I did, hired as a producer with big promises about the book of business he'd bring from his previous firm. That book of business never materialized. But he had something else: political skill, the ability to position himself near success and claim association with it. Within 4 years, he was director of our commercial lines division. My first major client was Westbridge Manufacturing. I'd been cold calling industrial companies for 3 months when I finally got a meeting with their risk manager, Susan Torres. "Give me one reason I should trust another broker," she said in that first meeting. I didn't give her promises. I gave her analysis. Spent 2 weeks reviewing their operations, identifying gaps in their current coverage. Presented her with a 23-page report showing exactly where her insurance program was failing and how to fix it. She sat there reading it in silence for 15 minutes. Then she looked up and said, "When can you start?" That account was worth $47,000 in annual commission, but more importantly, it was the beginning of a reputation. Within 3 years, I had a portfolio of industrial clients generating $389,000 in annual commission revenue, all from relationships I'd built through actually understanding their businesses. Graham noticed, started asking to sit in on my client meetings, said he wanted to learn my approach. What I didn't realize was that Graham was studying more than my sales methodology. He was learning my clients' names, their company details, their challenges, positioning himself to later claim he'd been involved all along. The first time it happened was year 5. I just closed Precision Components, an aerospace parts manufacturer, $2.3 million insurance program. $173,000 in first-year commission. I'd spent 6 months building that relationship. Graham called a division meeting the next week, stood in front of everyone and said, "I want to recognize the great work our team did closing the Precision Components account." Our team. I'd done every piece of that sale myself. Graham had attended exactly 1 meeting, contributed nothing, and was now presenting it as a team victory he'd overseen. I let it go. Told myself it didn't matter as long as the commission was credited properly, but it kept happening. Every major account I closed, Graham found a way to associate himself with it. And slowly, the narrative shifted. People in the company started believing Graham was the rainmaker. Here's where I need to pause and ask something. Have you ever had someone systematically take credit for your work while you just focused on doing the job? If that's you, drop a comment below. Tell us what happened. And if you're finding value in this, hit that like button. It helps us reach more people who need these stories. By year 10, Sterling Risk Partners had grown significantly. Our annual revenue had increased from $8.2 million to $31.7 million. Graham took credit for that growth in every company presentation, every industry conference. His story was simple. He'd built a collaborative culture that empowered producers to succeed. None of it was true. The growth had come from individual producers, mostly me, actually delivering value to clients. It mattered because compensation was based on perceived value. I was making $247,000 annually by year 12, but it wasn't reflective of my actual contribution. I was generating 63% of our division's revenue. My book of business generated $19.8 million of our division's $31.4 million in annual revenue. Yet my compensation was structured as if I was just a high-performing producer among many. Then came the merger announcement. Last December, Sterling Risk Partners was being acquired by Consolidated Risk Management, a national firm with 260 offices. Everyone in the industry knows what these mergers really mean. Consolidation, redundancy, elimination, cost synergies. Graham called a division meeting the next morning. "This is fantastic news," he said. "Yes, there will be some organizational changes, but the strong performers will have more opportunities than ever." Strong performers. I knew what that meant. People Graham wanted to protect would be labeled as strong performers. I'd be seen as replaceable. The transition period was 6 months. During that time, Consolidated Risk Management sent teams to audit our operations. Graham was in constant meetings with their executives, positioning himself. Controlling the narrative, I kept working, but I also started documenting everything. Every client acquisition. I documented how the relationship started, the sales process, the final close. I created a complete portfolio of 14 years of work. Client names, revenue generated, retention rates, letters from clients thanking me specifically, industry awards I'd won. It wasn't arrogance, it was evidence. The transition briefing was scheduled for July 18th at 2 p.m. Final organizational structure announcement. 47 people packed into the main conference room. Graham stood at the front next to Catherine Monroe, CFO of Consolidated Risk Management. "Over the past 6 months, we've been working to optimize our organizational structure," he started. "This means making some difficult decisions about roles and responsibilities." He pulled up a slide showing the new structure. My position wasn't there. "We're eliminating several redundant producer roles," Graham continued, still not looking at me. "Victor," Graham finally said, looking at me for the first time, "your role is one of the positions being eliminated. It's nothing personal, just structural redundancy from the merger. We'll provide a standard severance package. 3-month salary. 3-month salary, after 14 years of generating millions in revenue. After building the book of business that made Graham look successful, the room was silent. That heavy silence where everyone's thinking the same thing but nobody wants to say it. "Do you have any questions?" Graham asked. I reached into my bag, pulled out the leather portfolio, set it on the conference table with enough force that it made a sound. "I don't have questions," I said. "I have documentation." I slid the portfolio across the table toward Catherine Monroe. Not to Graham, to her. "This portfolio contains records of every client relationship I've built over 14 years. Every account I've personally closed, every piece of revenue I've generated. I think you'll find it interesting reading given Graham's presentation of our division's organizational structure." Catherine opened the portfolio, started reading. Her expression changed. She flipped to the second page, the third, looked up at me, then slowly, deliberately, turned her head toward Graham. And she started laughing, not a polite chuckle. Full, genuine laughter that filled that conference room. Graham's face went from confused to pale in about 3 seconds. "Graham," Catherine said, still laughing slightly, "this is remarkable. According to this documentation, Victor personally brought in and manages 63% of this division's revenue, $19.8 million in annual commission. That's not redundant. That's the entire foundation of what we just acquired." She flipped through more pages. "And according to these client letters, multiple accounts have clauses stating they're working with Sterling Risk Partners specifically because of Victor's expertise. Two of your largest clients have documented that they'll terminate their relationship if Victor leaves. Did you know that? Graham's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Catherine, I can explain the context. The context, she interrupted, is that you've been systematically taking credit for someone else's work while positioning yourself as irreplaceable. The context is that Victor Hayes is apparently the actual reason this division succeeded, and you just tried to eliminate him while keeping yourself in a director position. Is that accurate context? Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. It's more complicated than that. Graham finally managed. Victor's a strong producer, absolutely, but the division's success required leadership, strategy. My role was coordinating. Your role, Catherine said, voice dropping to something colder, was apparently taking credit. According to this portfolio, you've attended approximately 11% of Victor's client meetings over 14 years. You've personally closed exactly 3 accounts that generated more than $50,000 in annual revenue. Does that sound accurate? What direction? I spoke for the first time since handing over the portfolio. Name one strategic direction you gave me on any client I closed. One piece of guidance that actually influenced an account. Graham couldn't answer. Catherine turned to the VP of Operations. Tom, can you take Graham into another room? I need to have a different conversation here. They left. Catherine looked at me. Victor, I need to apologize. We relied on Graham's representations about organizational structure. This is a significant oversight on our part. What happens now? I asked. Now, Catherine said, we have a serious problem. If 63% of that performance is tied to you personally, and those clients have termination clauses if you leave, then eliminating you would destroy the value of our acquisition. We'd lose approximately 12 to 15 million in annual revenue within 90 days. She closed the portfolio. I need to understand something. Did you know this was coming? I knew Graham would try to eliminate me once the merger gave him cover. I said, I've watched him take credit for 8 years. So yes, I documented my work, not to sabotage anything, just to have evidence of reality if reality became important. It's important now, Catherine said. She turned to address the room. Everyone else can leave. Victor, I need you to stay. People filed out slowly. Within 3 minutes, the room was empty, except for Catherine, me, and one other consolidated executive. I'm going to be direct. We can't eliminate you without risking the entire acquisition. But I need to understand what you want from this situation. Here's where I need to pause again. If you've ever been in a moment where everything suddenly shifted in your favor, drop a comment and tell us what you did. Because what I said next changed everything. And if this is resonating with you, hit that like button and subscribe. What I want, I said slowly, is acknowledgement of what I actually built. Actual structural acknowledgement in the form of compensation, autonomy, and ownership of the relationships I created. Catherine nodded. Specific terms? First, I want my client relationships legally documented as mine, not company assets that can be reassigned. Mine. Second, I want compensation reflecting my actual contribution. I generated 19.8 million in revenue last year. I was paid 247,000. That's 1.25%. I want 4% going forward. That's 792,000 based on current production. Third, I want complete autonomy in managing my book of business. No oversight from Graham or anyone else. I report directly to senior leadership. Catherine didn't hesitate. Done. I'll have contracts drafted by tomorrow. Graham Sterling is finished here. He'll be terminated within 48 hours. Your role will be restructured as executive producer with equity participation. The next morning, I received draft contracts. Everything I'd asked for, plus 2% ownership of our division's revenue growth above baseline. I signed everything that afternoon. Graham was terminated the next day. Terminated for cause due to misrepresentation during the merger process. No severance beyond what was legally required. But here's what really mattered. Within 1 week, I started getting calls from clients. They wanted to know if I was still their broker. Every single one of them said the same basic thing. Good, we worked with Sterling Risk Partners because of you. If you'd left, we would have followed. Number 1. That confirmation was validation of everything my portfolio had documented. These relationships were mine, built through actual service and expertise rather than credit-taking and narrative control. Over the next 90 days, 3 things happened. First, I restructured my practice as an independent division, hired 2 junior producers, built an actual team. Second, my book of business grew. I closed 8 new accounts representing combined revenue of $4.2 million. Third, Graham's career imploded. Word spread in the industry about the merger day exposure. Insurance brokerage is a small industry. Within 6 months, Graham had taken a position at a small firm in another state, a significant step down. That was 11 months ago. Today, I run my own division within Consolidated Risk Management. My team has grown to 6 producers and 3 support staff. Our combined book of business generates $27.3 million in annual revenue. My personal compensation last year was $843,000 in salary and commissions, plus $217,000 in equity distributions, over $1 million total. More than 4 times what I made working under Graham. But the financial outcome isn't the most important part. The most important part is the shift in how I think about value and recognition. For 8 years, I'd watched someone take credit for my work and told myself it didn't matter. I'd convinced myself that focusing on the work was enough. That thinking was wrong. When you let someone else control the narrative about your contributions, you give them power to define your value. And when they define your value, they'll always define it lower than reality. Graham's attempt to eliminate me wasn't just about organizational redundancy, it was about protecting his narrative. As long as I was around, there was always a risk someone would look closely and realize his success was built on my work. But the portfolio changed that calculation. It forced Catherine and the Consolidated executives to confront reality instead of accepting Graham's narrative, and reality was undeniable. That portfolio saved my career, but more importantly, it taught me something about how value actually works in corporate structures. Your value isn't determined by your production. It's determined by who gets credit for your production. The documentation I'd maintained gave me control of that story. People ask me now if I should have confronted Graham earlier. My answer is that I don't know if earlier confrontation would have worked differently. What I know is that when the moment came, I had evidence. And that evidence was irrefutable. The leather portfolio sits in my office now, just sitting on a shelf where I can see it. It's a reminder, your work doesn't speak for itself. Someone has to speak for your work. And if you don't, someone else will. And they'll tell whatever story serves them rather than reflects reality. Since the merger, I've had 7 different producers reach out asking how I handled the elimination attempt. What I tell them is this: maintain records of everything you actually do, not for paranoia. Just as professional practice, who you bring in, how relationships develop, revenue generated, client feedback. Because the moment will come when someone tries to define your value incorrectly. And in that moment, evidence matters more than explanations. Let me be direct one more time. If you've ever let someone take credit for your work because confronting them seemed harder than accepting it, drop a comment below. Tell us what happened. And make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss stories about people who finally demanded recognition for what they'd actually built. 14 years. That's how long I spent building a book of business while someone else built a reputation on my work. Graham Sterling thought he could eliminate me because he'd controlled the narrative long enough to make me seem redundant. He was wrong. The portfolio proved he was wrong. Catherine's laughter when she read it proved everyone else knew he was wrong. And his termination 48 hours later proved that reality eventually matters more than narrative, but only if you have evidence of reality. I'm Victor Hayes. I'm 51 years old. An incoming director tried to eliminate my role after 14 years of building the division he took credit for leading. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I just slid a portfolio across a conference table to the CFO of the acquiring company. She read it, looked at me, turned to him, and started laughing. Because the evidence was undeniable. 3 months' salary. That's what Graham thought 14 years of my work was worth. He was wrong about the value, wrong about the redundancy, wrong about his ability to erase me from a story I'd actually written. The portfolio proved it. The laughter confirmed it. The termination finalized it. $792,000. That's what I made last year in base compensation, reflecting my actual contribution. Plus equity distributions that brought total compensation over $1 million. That's not revenge. That's just accurate compensation for accurately documented value. The portfolio didn't destroy Graham's career. His false narrative did. The portfolio just exposed it. Sometimes the best response to someone taking credit for your work isn't confrontation. It's documentation. Evidence maintained quietly, presented strategically, used decisively when the moment arrives. My moment arrived in a merger transition meeting when Graham tried to eliminate me. His moment ended when Catherine read my portfolio and started laughing. I documented my work for 14 years. Graham took credit for 8. When forced to prove who'd actually built what, the portfolio answered definitively. That answer cost him his career and launched mine. That's what documentation does. It turns competing narratives into provable facts, and facts, eventually, win.